Okay, so this week we're starting the book of Devarim, the last book of the Torah, and it happened to be that the book of Devarim is actually a speech of Moshe Rabbeinu. The entire book is a speech that Moshe Rabbeinu talks to the Jewish people just before he passes away. So let's start. It says like this: אלה הדברים אשר דיבר משה אל כל ישראל. These are the things that Moshe spoke to the entire Jewish people בעבר הירדן, on the other side of the Jordan, במדבר, in the desert, בערבה, in the plain, מול סוף, opposite the Red Sea, בין פרן ובין תופל, between פרן and between תופל, ולבן, and לבן, וחצרות ודיזהב, and חצרות and דיזהב. This is what it says in the verse itself. Rashi immediately explains, and Rashi says, אלה הדברים. By the way, if you look at it, it doesn't say there's a rebuke over here. There's no rebuke. It says these are the words. It says what words? So Rashi tells you should know all these words that are coming up are rebukes. This is a rebuke. Moshe is rebuking the Jewish nation. What is he rebuking them? לפי שהם דברי תוכחות, these are words of rebuke, ומנה כאן כל המקומות שהכעיסו לפני המקום בהן. Over here, he enumerated all the places that the Jewish people made God angry. לפיכך סתם את הדברים. So it says this why he said it in a hint. He said it in a way of a hint. והזכירם ברמז, and he only hinted upon them. Why did he only hint? מפני כבודן של ישראל, because he wanted not to embarrass the Jewish people. He wanted to give them honor. He didn't want to embarrass the Jewish people. That's what it says. It's a rebuke. Moshe doesn't want to embarrass the Jewish people, so he hints on the wrong things they did in someone. So let's continue. So it says, why does it say El Kol Israel? Obviously he's talking to the entire Jewish people. Every time he talked to the Jewish people. El Kol Israel, he talked to the entire Jewish people, which means he convened them into one place, and he talked to them. אי לא הוכיח מקצתן, because if he would have rebuked just a few of them, היו אלו שבשוק אומרים, those people that were not there, that were in the market, they would have said, אתם הייתם שומעים מבן אברהם ולא ישיבותם דבר מכך וכך. It says, how can you hear Moshe say such a thing about you and you didn't answer him? אילו היינו שמה, but we didn't sin like you guys. We are not sinners like you guys, because if we were there, we would have something to tell him back. אילו היינו שם, היינו משיבים אותו. If we would have been there, we would have answered him. So it says, so that nobody can say that he wasn't there and he had to say something, and he could have said, it wasn't me. So it says, לכך כנסם כולם, this is why he gathered them all together. ואמר להם, and he said to them, הרי כולכם כאן, all of you are over here. Excuse me. כל מי שיש לו תשובה ישיב. So if you have an answer for what you did wrong, this is your chance to answer right now. So let's see. במדבר, says this is in the desert, but the truth is that this wasn't in the desert at all. This was on the other side of the Jordan. It wasn't in the desert when he's saying the speech. So it says, לא במדבר היו, they were not in the desert, אלא בערבות מואב, but they were in the plains of Moab. ומהו במדבר? So why does it say in the desert? So for here it starts to enumerate, the word the desert starts to enumerate all the places they sin against God. How? אלא בשביל מה שהכעיסו במדבר. This is the first time the Jewish people went against God. They made God angry in the desert. שאמרו, because in the desert, you know, Jewish people, when they complain, they don't just say, we are tired, we are hungry, we are this. They say it in a nice way. So how did they say it? When Moshe came in, they told Moshe, it says, Mi ten mutenu, it says, oh, we would have died in Egypt. Why did you take us out of here to die over here? See, when Jewish people complain, they complain in a nice way. It would have been better for us to die in Israel. You took us out here into the desert to die. That was the first complaint. Be'arava, what is in the plain in the Arava? Bishvil Arava, this is the second rebuke. It is because of the plain. Which plain? In the plain that they sinned in Baal Peor, in the idol worship that is considered Baal Peor. Where was that? That was Beshitim, Be'arvot Moav. This is in the plains of Moav. The word Arava means a plain. So that's a hint for the second rebuke. Ba'arava. Mul Suf, against the sea, opposite of the Red Sea. What was the complaint over there? Again, we all know the complaint. Al ma she'imru b'yam suf bevuam liyam suf. This is when they said, when they came to the Red Sea, she'amru, and again, look at the way the Jewish people complain. Hamibli en kvarim b'Mitzrayim, they come to Moshe, they don't want to say, hey, the Egyptians are going to kill us, protect us. No, they're Jews. So how do they complain? It says, Moshe, what, there's not enough graves in Egypt? You want to make more graves over here? This is the way they complain. Hamibli en kvarim b'Mitzrayim, is there not enough grave in Egypt that you took us out here? V'chen benas'am mitoch hayam. And then again, when God saved them, He just saved them from the Red Sea. The Egyptians drowned. Shene'emar, ve'yamru al yam b'yam suf kede'ita barachim. It says they complained right after they went on the other side. They went through the sea and they came out on the other side. You know what they're telling Moshe? Instead of telling Moshe, thank you for saving us, thank God for saving us, you know what they said? They said to Moshe, the same way we came out, you know what? The Egyptians are going out and they're going to what? Now run after us and kill us. They didn't even trust God after they saw the miracle of the splitting of the sea. And then God, what did God have to do? He had to wash the Egyptians on the seashore with all their gold and jewelry to prove that they were dead. So you see, this is all of rebukes. Continue. Bein Paran u bein Tofel veLavan, between Paran and between Tofel and Lavan, Amar Rabbi Yochanan said, Chazarnu al kol hamikra v'lo matzinu makom sheshmo Tofel veLavan. It says, I looked at the entire Torah, the entire Nevi'im, the entire Ketuvim, the entire Gemorahs, the entire Mishnahs, everywhere. I looked everywhere. And you know what? I never found a place called Tofel or Paran, or Tofel or Lavan. Ela, so it says, what is he talking about? Hochichan al advarim shetaflu al aman. It says over here it was a rebuke because when in the desert God gave them this great miracle of manna, even on that they complained. When God gave the manna, heavenly bread, even then they complained. She'amru v'nafshenu katzar belechem makulkel. It says we are sick of the thing. It's a thing that you could taste anything. It says they complain to God, we are sick of the thing. So again, a rebuke on that. Ve'al ma she'asu b'midbar paran al yedei meraglim, and the sin that they made in midbar paran, despise. Again, he rebukes them on despise. Ve'chatzerot, what's the chatzerot? Again, it's another place where they went against God. B'machlakato shel Korach. This is when Korach went against the Kehuna, went against Aaron and Moshe, and he decided he wants to be a high priest. Davar acher, another thing, Amar lahem, haya lachem lilmod mima she'asite leMiriam b'chatzerot. It says, you should have learned from Miriam's mistake of speaking Lashon Hara, of speaking against somebody else. בשביל לשון הרע, ואתם נדברתם במקום, and you are speaking לשון הרע about God and about the land of Israel. Again, a rebuke. ודי זהב, and the word די זהב, literally it means an enough gold. What's that about? What's the rebuke on page number 5 on the way on the top? הוכיחן על העגל שעשו בשביל רוב הזהב. This is rebuke them on the golden calf that they did, as Moshe says, when they made the golden calf, Moshe says, God, you are part of the cause that they made the golden calf. You gave them so much silver and gold that their mind became crooked. You gave them so much riches, what did you expect them to do with all the riches? You gave them a too hard test. That's what it says. שהיה להם, they had so much gold that שנאמר, וכסף הרבית עליו וזהב עשו לה לבעל. It says, once you have too much gold, people are looking for stupidities to do with this money, and this is what was the problem, that you gave them too much gold. In other words, it says to God, don't punish them so severely because it wasn't entirely their fault. Who can pass such a test? The test of money. Okay? So all these places, everything that we just read, are places where Moshe rebukes the Jewish nation. And today this is going to be our discussion. How to rebuke and what to rebuke. So let's see. Vayehi, it says, when is this rebuke taking place? So it says, let's look. Vayehi ba'arba'im shana, it was on the 40th year. Moshe took over the leadership of the nation when he was 80. This is 40 years later. He's 120. He's going to become 120 now. Ba'ashta chodesh, in the 11th month, be'echad lachodesh, on the first of the month, diber Moshe el bnei Israel, kechol asher tziva oto alehem. Moshe spoke to the Jewish people everything that he spoke to them. And Rashi says, Vayehi b'arba'im shana b'ashta lachodesh, be'echad lachodesh, it was in the 11th month, on the first of the month. It says, melamed shelo chichan ela samuch lemita. This is the first rule we learn about rebuke. What's the rule? The rule is you only rebuke when a person is in his deathbed. It says, what? What's that about? Mimi lamad, it says, who did he learn it from? Who did Moshe learn to rebuke on his deathbed? Mi Yaakov. He learned it from Jacob, our forefather. It says, how does he see Jacob the forefather? Shelo echiach et banav ela samuch lemita. We see Jacob only rebuked his sons on his deathbed. Amar, where do we see it? Amar, Reuven bni. He said, Reuven, my son. Ani omer lecha mipnei ma lo chachticha kol hashanim halalu. It says, why didn't I rebuke you until now? It says, let's just discuss this quickly. Yaakov had 4 wives, Leah, Rachel, Bila, and Zilpah. His main wife was Rachel, which means his bed used to be in her tent. Yaakov's bed, that was the main place. It used to be in his tent. She was the main wife. After Rachel passed away, she died, Yaakov moved his tent into Bilhah's tent, which was the maidservant of Rachel. He moved his tent into Bilhah's tent. What did Reuven say? Reuven was protecting the honor of his mother. Reuven says what? Until now, my mother was second fiddle to Rachel. What? Now she's going to be second fiddle to Rachel's maid? So what did he do? He took the bed out of Bilhah's tent and he put it in Leah's tent. And Yaakov didn't like it. Yaakov says, how is that your business? He says, obviously.
That's a midrash, right? Because I don't remember it from the...
It says, Bilbel Yetzuei Aviv.
That's the Bereshit.
That's what it says. Bilbel Yetzuei Aviv. Bilbel Yetzuei Aviv. כדי שלא תניחנה ותלך ותדבק בעשיו אחיו. In the verse it says, וישכב ראובן את בלהה. And then Rashi immediately says he didn't really do it. He took the bed. בלבל יצא אביו. That's what Rashi says. Look in the verse over there. So because of this, so it says, why didn't I rebuke you until now? He asks Reuven. So I'll tell you why I didn't rebuke you until now. So look at the reason. כדי שלא תניחני, I didn't rebuke you until now because when you rebuke a person, you better know what's going to be the result. And usually when you rebuke a person, you know what the result is? He leaves you. Nobody likes to hear rebuke. So you know what I was afraid you're going to do? You're going to leave me. You're going to go to Esav. You're going to go in his way. I was afraid that's what's going to happen. That's why I never rebuked you. And this is what Yaakov tells Reuven. ותדבק בעשיו אחי. I was afraid you're going to leave my way and you're going to go to my brother Esav. So that's the first rule we learned. You only rebuke next to deathbed. I know your question. We're going to come to it. We're going to address it. ומפני ארבעה דברים אין מוכיחים את האדם. And now we're going to say there are going to be 4 good reasons that you don't rebuke a person. אלא סמוך למיטה. You only do it close to a person's death. When you're about a person who is in deathbed, then you can rebuke. Don't rebuke before. Why? Rule number 1. כדי שלא יהיה מוכיחו וחוזר ומוכיחו. Because what are you going to do? You're going to rebuke him once, and then you're going to rebuke him again, and then you're going to rebuke him again. How many times do you want to rebuke a person? You see, this is what we do. If you notice, when you rebuke a person, you have a son, and you tell him he's going wrong, how many times? It's enough to tell him once, right? But as good parents, what do? We say it again, and again, and again, and again. And every time you say it, there's going to be more resentment, and more resentment, and more resentment, and the son feels, excuse me, you told it to me yesterday, you told me the day before, obviously either I don't want to do it, or it's too hard for me. Why are you repeating yourself again and again and again? You just become sick of it.
You don't listen after it.
That's right, you don't want to listen. So to prevent over-repeating of the rebuke, just say it once. When is that once? Before you die. That's the first one.
Don't listen when you're on your deathbed.
And another reason not to rebuke, it says another reason not to rebuke, שלא יהיה חברו רועהו ומתבייש ממנו כדי בספרי. It says when you rebuke a person, there might be people around, and then this person is going to be embarrassed while you rebuke him. And you know, when you put a person, when you give him a name that he's an evil person, he becomes evil. The whole community looks at him as evil, says, oh, his father rebuked him for doing this and this and this and this. That's the image that he gets. And then the person gets embarrassed, and it's not going to lead to good things. That's the second reason. Page 6 in the top. וכן יהושע, and we find the same thing when it comes to Yehoshua. לא הוכיח את ישראל אלא סמוך למיטה. He only rebuked the Jewish people when he was clothed on his deathbed. וכן שמואל, and also by Shmuel הנביא, שנאמר, הנה ענו בי, וכן דוד את שלמה. It says it's also about Shmuel, it's also David and Shlomo. Everybody we see, the rebuke they kept for the deathbed. Well, let's see all the rebuke. We're going to read all the rebukes quickly. Page number 6 in the middle of the page. This is the rebuke of Jacob, again on his deathbed. ויקרא יעקב אל בניו, ויאמר יעקב called to his son, and he says, האספו ואגידה לכם את אשר יקרה אתכם באחרית הימים. Gather together, I'm going to tell you what's going to happen in the end of days. הקבצו ושימו בני יעקב ושימו את ישראל אביכם. Listen to your father. ראובן בחורי אתה. ראובן, he says, you are my firstborn. כוחי וראשית אוני, you are my first drop. יתר שאת ויתר אז, become strong. פחז כמים על תותר, כי עלית משכבי אביך. He says, you went up on the bedding of your father. אז חיללת יצוי עלה. Then you disgraced me. What do you think? I don't know what I'm doing? I know what I'm doing. He says, don't decide things for your father. And again, when was the rebuke? Right before his deathbed. Let's look at Joshua. ויהי מימים רבים אחרי אשר הניח להשם לישראל מכל אויביהם. After God rested the Jewish people from all their enemies. ויהושע זקן בא בימים. Joshua was old of age. ויקרא יהושע לכל ישראל. Joshua called the entire Jewish people, לזקניו, לראשיו, לשופטיו, all the leaders. ויאמר אליהם, and he said to them, אני זקנתי בת הימים, I'm about to die. וחזקתם מאוד לשמור לעשות את כל הכתוב בספר תורת משה. It says you should keep whatever is written in the Torah that Moshe gave you. לבלתי סור ממנו ימין ושמאל. Don't go left or right. לבלתי בו בגויים אלה הנשארים אלה איתכם. Because you know what you guys are doing? You are marrying the Gentiles around you and you're learning from them. You're becoming idol worship because of them. ובשם אלוהיהם לא תזכירי ולא תסבירי. You started swearing in the names of their gods. You started serving their gods. ולא תעבדום ולא תשתחוו להם. כי אם בהשם אלוקיכם תדבקו, you should only stick to God. כאשר עשיתם עד היום הזה, just like you did until this day. Again, he's rebuked them before his deathbed. He could have rebuked them his entire life, but he waits until his deathbed and he says, you guys, you're marrying non-Jewish women. Not only you marrying non-Jewish women, you are learning to worship idols from them, and now all of you are, or in other words, tell them, take the idols away from your homes. Pretty much, this is what he tells them. Let's look at Samuel quickly. On page 7, in the bottom, ויאמר שמואל אל כל ישראל, Samuel said to the entire Jewish people, ואני זקנתי וסבתי It says, I became old. Again, the concept of the rebuke comes only when they're old. ובניי הנה איתכם, and my sons here with you, ואני התהלכתי לפניכם מנעוריי עד היום הזה. I always walked amongst you. הננו ענו בי נגד השם ונגד משיחו. It says, answer if you can answer. את שור מי לקחתי וחמור מי לקח ואת מי משקתי. I never took anything away from you. I'm not like the politicians who live from the congregants. You know, the politicians live of the nation. It says, I never took a penny from the things. את מי רצותי ומיד מי לקחתי כופר. I never took bribery. ואעלים עיניי בו ואשיב לכם. ויאמרו, and they said, לא עשקנו ולא רצותנו לקחתם יד איש מאומה. It says, you are righteous. You didn't take any things that didn't belong to you. ויאמר שמואל אל העם, and Shmuel said to the nation, השם אשר עשה את משה ואת אהרון, God that made Moshe and Aaron, ואשר העלת אבותיכם מארץ מצרים, that made you go out of Egypt, ועתה התייצבו וישבתה איתכם לפני השם, עושה כל צדקות אשר עשה איתכם ואת אבותיכם. Now God may judge us. Page 8. And again, Shmuel, again, you see that he's saying, don't take bribery, don't do all these things. Page 8, we have King David. Again, ויקרבו ימי דוד למות. Again, it was the day just before King David passed away. ויצב את שלמה בנו לאמור, הנה commanded שלמה his son to say, אנוכי הולך בדרך כל הארץ וחזקת והיית לאיש. It says, I'm going to die, you should become strong and become a man. ושמרת את משמרת השם אלוקיך, ללכת בדרכיו, לשמור חוקותיו, מצוותיו, משפטיו ולאותיו. Keep all the Torah, keep all the commandments, ככתוב בתורת משה, just like it's written in the Torah of Moshe. למען תשכיל את כל אשר תעשה ואת כל אשר תפנה שמה. Make sure, do not deviate from what the Torah tells you. Okay. So now we're going to discuss a couple of questions that I know your question is going to be straight in the front. So let's look at page number 9. על הפסוק on the verse, ויהי ב40 שנה, ב12 חודש, באחד לחודש, in the 40th year, in the 11th month, on the first of the month, מפרש רש"י, מלמד שלא הוכיחן אלא סמוך למיטה. It tells us that he only rebuked them close to his bed, deathbed. And immediately Yoram is going to ask the question, excuse me, all throughout the desert, what is Moshe doing with the Jewish people all the time?
Well, he started his career, למה תכה את אחיך?
That's right.
Day one.
Day one.
Before he even saw the snake.
And all throughout the desert, he's rebuking them constantly. They're constantly doing something wrong, and he's constantly rebuking them. So what is Rashi talking about over here? That's the first question. What is going on over here? What do you mean he doesn't rebuke them until now? He's constantly rebuking them. Throughout the desert, that's all he does.
The rock, when he hit the rock, didn't he?
No, whenever they did something wrong, he says, yeah, you guys are going against God. What are you doing? Hundreds of times.
Not just when he died, because my kid may be 80 years old. If I'm 120, my kid may be 95, and I want him to get married properly.
Very good.
Then I tell you, don't marry us.
Very good. Excellent question. וצריך להבין, and we have to understand, this is the question that you want to ask from the beginning. מצינו ריבוי פעמים, we found hundreds of times. לפני זה, before this, שמשה רבינו הוכיח את ישראל, that Moshe rebuked the Jewish nation. ולדוגמה, בעת שאמרו בבואם לים סוף, at the time they go to the Red Sea, שאמרו, המבלי אין קברים במצרים, when they complained, they told Moshe, hey, there's not enough graves in Egypt that you took us to die over here. שעל זה הוכיחם משה ואמר להם, and this is, Moshe rebuked them right there and then. What do you mean? He rebuked them right there and then. And you know what he told them? השם ילחם לכם ואתם תחרישון. It says, guys, be quiet. God is going to fight the war. He rebuked them. It says, you don't have faith in God. במרה וכולו. In מרה, when they had bitter water, he rebuked them. והדרך זה בשאר הניסיונות שניסו את הקדוש ברוך הוא. In any time they went against God, they got rebuked by Moshe. And Moshe himself says, וינסו אותי 10 פעמים, they tried me 10 times. וכן בכל המקומות שהכעיסו לפני המקום, in all the places that we mentioned before, that they went against God, שנמנו בתחילת הפרשה, שהוכיחן מיד בעת המעשה, he rebuked them immediately when they were doing it. ואיך אומר רש"י שלא הוכיחן אלא סמוך למיטה? So how does Rashi say he only rebuked them when he was close on his deathbed? First question. Second question. ויש להוסיף עוד. Second of all, we have to add another question. A klats kasha. A klats kasha is a simple question. A simple question are the hardest question to answer. Those questions that nobody asks ever because they're embarrassed to ask with such a simple question, but nobody knows the answer to. Yeah, this is one of those questions. So it says, מכוון שמדובר אודות דברי תוכחות. Over here we talks about words of rebuke. Right? Talks about words of rebuke. מהי התועלת להזכירם ברמז? It says, why did Moshe hint them? He should have rebuked. You know, when you rebuke, you did this and this wrong. You don't hint. Because if you hint, the person is what? Says, I don't know what you're talking about. Hint to a 5-year-old when he's doing something wrong that he did something wrong. And then you ask him, why you did it again? He says, what do you mean why I did it again? You didn't tell me not to do it. You hinted? I didn't understand what you hinted. She says, שכאשר רוצים מבינים את הרמז, וכשלא רוצים לא מבינים. It says, when you want, you understand the hint, and when you don't want, you don't understand the hint. כפי שיודע בן 5 למקרא בעצמו, just like a 5-year-old knows. כשרוצים לומר דברי תוכחו, כדי שיפעלו פעולתו, צריכים לבחור באופן גלוי. When you want to rebuke somebody, you have to be clear. You have to put it on the table. He has to know what you're talking about. You cannot just, hint. You have to be clear. You don't hint. And over here, all of these are a hint. What is that all about? לאידך גיזה. On the other thing, and another question we're going to have to ask. מכיוון שהכתוב סתם את הדברים, it says God did not reveal these things. He put them in the Torah as a hint, right? It was a hint in the Torah. Why? So we answered already why. Anybody remembers why? Why is it only in a hint? So it says not to embarrass the Jewish people. He didn't want to embarrass them. You don't embarrass them in public. It's not nice to embarrass a person in public. Says, you did such and such and such. It's not nice. So you say it in a hint way, right? So it says, והזכירן ברמז, it was only mentioned as a hint, מפני כבודן של ישראל, because he wanted to honor the Jewish people. So he asked a question. I don't understand Rashi. If God wanted not to mention the Jewish people, that they sinned in such terrible things, how come Rashi immediately tells you, hey, guys, you know what the hint is? Imagine the rabbi, there's a group of kids next to the rabbi, and one of them did something wrong. And the rabbi wants to hint to one of them that you're doing something wrong. So he hints. And the guy understands. And somebody else comes around and he said, you know what it means? You know what the rabbi said? The rabbi meant him specifically because excuse me, the rabbi said it in a hint, so you don't do that. So you don't get embarrassed. You come and you embarrass the entire Jewish people now? Says Rashi, what are you doing? That's the second question. הייתכן שרש"י מגלה מה שסתם ורמז הכתוב והפך מגדולה של ישראל? And Rashi comes around and reveals the sin of the Jewish people, that God wanted to keep it hidden. He didn't want to embarrass them. He says, what is going on over here? What's the story over here? Who's against who? So let's continue. ועל דרך שמצינו בגמרא מעשה רב בנוגע למקושש. We found a similar occurrence when it comes to a person who did not keep Shabbat in the midbar, in the desert. He started gathering wood. So there's a case about him. We're not going to discuss this case right now. Tanur Rabbanan, so it says in Talmud Shabbat, it says the rabbis, Mekoshesh, you know who's the guy who gathered the wood? Zet Tzlofchad. This is Tzlofchad. You know Tzlofchad, the father of the 3 girls, of the 4? 3. Of Chagla, Noah, did 3 or 4, I don't remember. Okay, whatever. So the father of the 3 girls that wanted to inherit the land, that they wanted a part of the inheritance of the land, it says their father, so it says, Mekoshesh zetzlofcha divrei Rabbi Akiva. It says, I learned this, from whom? From Rabbi Akiva. So Rabbi Akiva comes into yeshiva one day, we are on page 10, the bottom paragraph. Rabbi Akiva comes into yeshiva one day and he says, guys, I've got it. Says Rabbi Akiva, what did you get? He says, I have something that I just figured out. So he told him, Rabbi Akiva, tell us, what did you figure out? It says, do you know in the Torah, the guy who was gathering wood on Shabbat, You know who he was? He was Tzlofchad. So everybody says, wow, how did you figure it out? Did he explain to them how he figured it out? As soon as he finished talking, you know what happened? Amar lo Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera, Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera stood up and he said to Rabbi Akiva, Akiva ben kach u ben kach ata atid liten et adin. It says, Rabbi Akiva, whether you're right, whether you're wrong, they're going to judge you for it. In other words, you're going to get punished for it. That's right. It says, whether you're right, whether you're wrong, you're going to get judged. Why? How are you going to get judged? Im kedvarecha. It says, if I believe you that it is Tzlofchad, why didn't God write in the Torah it was Tzlofchad? Because he didn't want to embarrass him. He didn't want to embarrass his daughters. He didn't want, right? Kisato haTorah. It says the Torah hid him on purpose. God hid him on purpose. And you coming and what? And revealing it? V'ata megale oto, and now you come and reveal? That's not nice. God hid it. You're revealing? Ve'im lav. And if you're wrong, you're taking a chance.
That's Lashon Hara.
It's worse than Lashon Hara. Lashon Hara, it's when it's true. Over here, אתה מוציא לעז. It's a lie. It wasn't even him. אתה מוציא לעז על אותו צדיק. He's a righteous person. And you called him that he's desecrating Shabbat? That's not nice. Whichever way you want to go, you're wrong, Rabbi Akiva. Now think about something very interesting. אנו רואים שם, so what do we see? שרבי יהודה בן בטרה, Rabbi Yehuda, the son of Betera, התרעם על רבי עקיבא. He didn't like that Rabbi Akiva revealed it. He says if something is hidden, the Torah hates it, keep it hidden. Don't say it out loud. Not everything you have to say out loud. Sometimes you hint to somebody, keep it quiet, that's it. על כך שהוא גילה משהו שהתורה העלימה. It says if God decided to hide something, don't reveal it. ועל דרך זה בנידון דידן. So now we have to understand in our case. The Torah hid it on purpose because of the honor of the Jewish people, all the sins. It was written in a hint. Why did Rashi come around and tell us what did it wrong?
So it was in the Rembes. It's not in the Pshat.
That's why it was a hint.
It was not in the Trash, it was in a hint. Akiva went to the Pardes, so he figured.
That's right. And Rashi went the same and he figured it out. Said, but you don't reveal it to everybody else. Keep it quiet. Even if you know it, keep it quiet to yourself. Don't reveal it. If God wanted to reveal it, he would have revealed it himself. Okay. Let's continue to understand what's going on over here. The first question is, we're going to address the rebuke before death or not to rebuke before death. And like Yoram says, what do you mean? Moshe rebuked them hundreds of times before his death. Why do you say only rebuked them before the death? So let's see. Page 12. הביאור בפירוש רש"י מלמד שלא הוכיחן אלא סמוך למיטה. Rashi explains that he only rebuked them close to his death. כל ענייני תוכחה שמצינו עד עתה, every time we find a rebuke in the Torah, שמשה הוכיח את בני ישראל על דברים בלתי רצויים, that Moshe rebuked the Jewish people when they were behaving in the wrong way, מכיוון שנאמרו בעת מעשה. It says, don't even think it was, we're going to learn that there are two kinds of rebuke. There's a rebuke at the time that the person is doing something wrong. That's one rebuke. מובן שאין זה עניין של הוכחה. This is not called rebuke. When a person is about to hit his brother and you tell him, don't hit your brother, this is not a rebuke. What is it? It's prevention. You're preventing him from doing something wrong. This is not called rebuke. We're going to see soon. Yeah, there's two types of rebuke.
But if you violate the Shabbat, and I see you, I say,
hey,
that's on the spot. It's not prevention.
Oh,
you already did something.
So you're doing it for the next Shabbat. It says you're not allowed to do it. Again, it's prevention for the next time, but it's prevention. You're doing it as a prevention, not as a rebuke. We're going to see the difference. שאין זה עניין של תוכחה בלבד. It's not only rebuke. In other words, you're not interested in giving him a speech about morality. That's not the point. You're not giving him a speech about morality. You know what you're doing?
Correcting his
behavior. Very good. You're correcting his behavior. כי אם עניין הנוגע למעשה בפועל, you are preventing him from going the wrong way immediately. להפרושי מאיסורא, you prevent him from doing something which was prohibited. מה שאין כן דברי תוכחות, but words of rebuke are not there to prevent a person from doing a sin. Words of rebuke are moral judgments. You're teaching him morality. That's words of rebuke, we're going to see soon. שבפרשתם אינם להפרושי מאיסורא. Over here, on his deathbed, he's not telling them all these things because they're about to do them. That's not why he's telling them. You know what he's telling them? He says, guys, you've done this and 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 this in the past. You're not doing it now, today. Just learn from it. Remember.
Not only that, do a tshuva.
Do tshuva and learn from it. We're going to see it's not exactly that. And learn from it for the future to become better people. It's kind of this kind of things. Let's see. שהרי לא מדובר אודות חטא מסוים שאירע בעת ההיא. He's not talking about a sin that's happening right now. He's talking in general about things that happened in the past. And also remember that none of these people that he's talking to did any of the sins. All the people that did the sins, where are they right now in the 40th year? They're all dead. None of the people we're talking to did any of the sins. He's telling them the sins of their fathers. Remember, so it says, why are you telling them? What's the point? They're not doing it right now.
Reuven was alive. It's Jacob.
Yeah, over there it was alive. But over here, none of them are alive. None of them even are there. כי אם משה רבנו מזכיר את כל העניינים הבלתי רצויים, so this is the second kind of rebuke. Let's understand what kind of rebuke this is. Moshe Rabbeinu tells them all these things that were not good, שיראו במשך 40 שנה that happened in the 40 years, כלומר, לא עניין שיראה עכשיו, none of them happened right now. They all happened 40 years ago, ולא רק עניין אחד. And when you rebuke, you only rebuke about one thing at a time to prevent it. You don't rebuke about everything that the guy did wrong in his entire life. Just rebuke. But over here, we see that he rebukes them on everything they did in the entire life. We are in the middle of page 12. ולא רק עניין אחד, אלא ריבוי עניינים. He's talking about many things. ועוד גם זה ועיקר, and furthermore, שמזכיר כל זה, לא לחוטאים עצמם. He doesn't even mention it to the persons who sins. שכבר תמו קודשי המלחמה למות. Because all the people who sinned are already dead. אלא לדור שנכנסו לארץ. He mentioned it to the generation that went into the land. Let's try to understand what is happening over here. ונמצא שאין כאן עם דברי תוכחות בלבד. So now we already learned that there are two kinds of rebuke. There's a rebuke you do at the time when a person is doing something wrong, and the main part of that rebuke is not to rebuke him, is to prevent him doing something wrong. And then there's this rebuke. This rebuke is not when the person is doing something wrong. It might not even be to the person. It might even be just learn from the person. Yeah, King David once hinted that the reason why Bathsheba, the whole thing that he had with Bathsheba, was in order for the Jewish people to learn how to do tshuva. It says the reason why I did it was brought around because now the Jewish people can see somebody that did such a terrible thing as this can learn how to do tshuva. That's what King David said about the. Okay, כי אם דברי תוכחות בלבד, this is just words of תוכחה. ועל זה אומר רש"י, and now we can understand what Rashi says. שבנוגע לדברי תוכחות, when it becomes to words of rebuke, not words of rebuke, there's two kinds, not the words of rebuke to prevent somebody from doing something wrong. Words of rebuke means morality, to teach morality, לא להפרוש מאיסורא, not to prevent him from doing something wrong, כי אם דברי תוכחות בלבד, but just words of rebuke, לא הוכיחן אלא סמוך למיתה. This is why he only rebuked them once, and when? Close to his deathbed. So he says, you want to teach morality? How many times you teach morality? Once. You want to prevent somebody from doing something wrong? Prevent him 1,000,000 times, I don't care. But to teach morality, you don't constantly talk about it and talk about it and talk about it hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times until the guy says, leave me alone already. Once. כפי שלמד מיעקב, and he learned it from Yaakov. Page 13. הביאור בכך שמשה רבנו הזכיר את החטאים רק ברמז. Now we need to understand. How come Moshe Rabbeinu only hinted? מפני כבודם של ישראל. So he said, because he wanted to honor the Jewish people. He says, what is going to say? Hey, your father did this, your mother did this. ואף על פי כן פירש וגילה רש"י דברי תוכחות אלו. So how come Rashi reveals it? If God wants it hidden, how do we see that Rashi reveals it? We asked this question before. So let's understand this. הזהירות לסתום את הדברים ולהזכיר ברמז בלבד. It says we are very careful to hint on things and only to mention in a hint. נדרשת בעיקר בזמנו של משה. That was only necessary at Moshe's time. שאז נאמרו דברי תוכחות אלו. At the time that the words of the rebuke were mentioned. מה שאין כן כאשר לומדים פסוק זה לאחרי ריבוי זמן. But when you learn this verse after 2,000 years, when Rashi explained it 2,000 years later, בדורו של רש"י, in the generation of Rashi was 900 years ago, הרי מכיוון שזה אין זה בעידנא דרתיחא, it's not at the time that the emotions are hot, יכולים כבר לפרש ולגלות את הרמז. It is not embarrassing anyone by saying the hint. You know what? You have the same idea in American politics. And I think it's 50 years in American politics. It says that many things are sealed, that happens in politics, and they're only going to be opened
50 years later.
50 years later. It says, and part of the reason is not to embarrass the people. By the way, just now, Kissinger was embarrassed by some things that happened in Yom Kippur. Kissinger is still alive. And there were some things that he said when Yom Kippur happened that he didn't want to go out, and they were just revealed. So, but it shows you that 50 years later, people are not, even the Israelis, that they hear Kissinger say it, it's something that happened 50 years, we're not mad. If it was 5 years later, people are still angry about it. How did you say it? 50 years later, nobody remembers, nobody cares, nobody does. So even though we're talking about something that is not honorable to the Jewish people, Rashi says, צריכים לפרש ולגלות בשביל ביאור הכתבים. Now we need to explain to them, because otherwise people are going to read the verse and they won't understand what this verse is talking about. And we're not embarrassing anybody by revealing who it was, because those people lived when? 2,000 years ago. Nobody is going to get embarrassed. והדרך זה יש לומר בנוגע לטענת רבי יהודה בן בתרא לרבי עקיבא. And now you remember with Rabbi Akiva that revealed Tzlofchad. It says, what happened? HaTorah kista v'ata megalo. He told to Rabbi Akiva, the Torah hid him and you reveal him. It's a good statement. And what do we see? HaTorah kisato. The Torah hid that it was Tzlofchad who was transgressed Shabbat. Beshat Maaseh. Why? Because his daughters were alive. His family were alive. You're hurting somebody if you reveal who it is at that generation. שאז לא היה נוגע מי הוא מקושש. כי אם שדינו של המקושש כך וכך מפני כבודו כיסתו התורה. So it says, because you couldn't care who it was, you just need to know that a person is not allowed to desecrate Shabbat. אבל בזמנו של רבי עקיבא, but at the time of Rabbi Akiva, that's thousands of years later. It says, whose honor are you protecting? You're not protecting anybody's honor. לאחרי ריבוי זמן יכולים לגלות. After many years you're allowed to reveal. Just like, ולא עוד, אלא שצריכים לגלות. Not only you can reveal, you have to reveal. You need to reveal. Why? וראיה לדבר, it says, how do I know that you need to reveal? שלמרות טענת רבי יהודה בן בתרא לרבי עקיבא, because even though we have the question that Rabbi Yehuda asked Rabbi Akiva, how can you do such a thing? How can you talk gossip? HaTorah kisato v'ta megale. The Torah hid him and you reveal him. What do we see? We know the story. Why do we know the story? Because it was written down in the Gemara. The Gemara decided to write it down and to say it was Tzlofchad. קבע רב אשי בגמרא, רב אשי, when he compiled the Gemara, את דבריו של רבי עקיבא, he put it in there, the words of רבי עקיבא. מקושש זה צלופחד, he put in that the guy who gathered the wood is צלופחד. שכן, לאחרי שגילה רבי עקיבא שמקושש זה צלופחד, הרי זה חלק בתורה. That after he revealed, that he figured out who this gatherer of sticks is, yeah, it was part of the Torah and everybody needs to know. ואדרבה, and furthermore, טענת רבי יהודה בן בטרה, התורה כיסתו ואתה מגלה, when רבי יהודה בן בטרה says, the Torah hid him and you reveal him, נקבעה בגמרא כדי להדגיש, it was said in the Gemara in order to mention, שלמרות שקיימת סברה שאין לגלות מה שהתורה כיסתו, that you would think not to reveal what the Torah hid, you should know that if somebody can gain something out of it, can learn something out of somebody else's mistake, absolutely you should learn from it. Absolutely you should, as long as you're not embarrassing anybody that's right here, right alive. You should wait a couple of years, or say it without a name, for example, in order not to embarrass somebody. מכל מקום המסקנה היא, the conclusion היא, שסוף כל סוף בא הזמן שיש לגלות. That there is a time that a person has to reveal what the Torah has to be about, because of why the rebuke will come in order, so it is a moral teaching for all of us. There's something else that we need to learn from it. We are not Christians, which means it is not looked nice upon a person to talk Lashon Hara even about himself. A person should not talk Lashon Hara about himself even to his own son. Should not, in other words, shouldn't tell your son, you know what, last week I just did this and this and this and this, learn from me, don't do it. No, that's not something good to say. Yeah? Because it is a teaching of Lashon Hara about oneself. But if it's something that happened in the person's youth 40 years ago, 50 years ago, and the kid can learn something from it, and so it says, why should you tell him about yourself? You can tell him that it happened to this person, because you can't tell him that it happened to a person, because it's not going to touch him. If you tell him it happened to me, it's going to affect him much more than it happens to somebody else. So there is a point about also mistakes in our lives that we went wrong, and we want to affect somebody, to teach somebody, just like King David did with Bathsheba or whatever. You know, he says, learn from my mistakes. Learn from the way I did it. I saw it your way, I did it what you're thinking right now, this is the way I was thinking. I tried it that way, and this is the shortcomings of the way. It might work for you, I don't know, but I'm telling you in my experience, that might have affected him much more than this. And this is something that one shouldn't be embarrassed to admit, to other people that we did it wrong.